Don't worry about a thing.
Don't worry.
'Cause Atticus Health will make you feel alright.
I'm Ilana Razbash, and this is Radio Architecture. Good evening from beautiful Bunurong country. We are broadcasting to you live on Radio Karam from the unceded lands of the Eastern Kulin Nation. And I particularly want to mention the waters and the lands and waters that the Bunurong people are connected to, because the last few days have been so hot out here on the Long Beach, and many of us have been swimming and enjoying the waterways. Welcome back for another evening of Radio Architecture with Ilana Razbash. This is the 79th live broadcast, and we are so glad to have you with us again, particularly after our brief early autumn pause. If you'd like to join the conversation this evening, you can text us in the studio on 0493 213 831. We'd love to have you with us and read out your questions live on air as well. My guest and conversation partner this evening is Hae-Won Shin, Senior Lecturer at Monash University and a Korean architect who works in architecture and urban infrastructure projects at a wide range of scales. She founded Local Design in Seoul in 2005 and received the Young Architects Award from the Korean Architects Institute in 2013. In 2021, she was the curator of the Korean Pavilion at the 17th Venice Architecture Biennale and the project Future School. Welcome to the program, Hae-Won.
Oh, hello.
I'm so glad to have you on. This is a very humble, very curt, short bio that you sent me because
that was good.
You're a curator, you're an educator, you're an academic, you're a practicing architect. And really breaking news today, I'm so lucky to have you on because you're involved in the Seoul Biennale of Architecture and Urbanism as well, which has just been announced. So that's hot off the press.
Yes. Well, I've been participating with the Seoul Biennale in Architecture and Urbanism previously, but this time it's special because it's a community engaged project, so I'm looking forward to it.
It's a creative community projects, and you're really the team curator of the Chongnang Uri. Mm-hmm. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that one?
I don't know if I can actually say a little bit more about it. It needs to be announced again through the website, Seoul Architecture and Urbanism Biennale. Only the title Chongnang Naduri has been announced. So actually even the names are not published yet. So
this is breaking news on Radio Architecture.
Yes. So this is something that not even closest friends know yet. But naduri is a special word for Korean. It's sort of it's like outing or walkabout. So we're gonna do a walkabout around Chongnang, which is in the north part of this old kind of neighborhood in Seoul, and we're gonna work with Seongbo Cultural Foundation, Art Foundation. So that's something to be continued.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And is this a free public program, or people need to buy tickets? How can listeners get involved?
So Biennale Architecture and Urbanism is it's for all the citizens and citizens of the world, or citizens to Korea, but it's going to usually opens in September and runs for 3 months in Seoul. And it usually is exhibited, and public programs are spread out across the city.
It sounds incredible.
Yeah, Korea. Mm-hmm.
Infuse your travel, listeners. Plan your trip. See what architectural events are happening when you're planning your trip at the same time. And if you're in Seoul in September or nearby, absolutely stop by the Seoul Biennale of Architecture and Urbanism Creative Community Projects. Well, I love that.
Great.
I want to ask you a question I ask all my guests. And that's, what's your earliest memory of a building or place?
Building my place.
Building or place. What's your earliest memory?
earliest memory. And this is something that I actually reflected when I moved here to Melbourne already 2.5 years or 3 years ago. And I was brought up in what we call the countryside, south side of Korea, Jeollanam-do. And this is a farming village. And we had a traditional Korean humble house, farming house, and we had also a cow hut next to it was a like a L-shaped house with the cow next to where we live, a cow hut. So that's this beautiful setting around mountains, around waters, and yeah, so that's where we visit actually every year for paying respect to the elders. So we go and bring food, and we have also soju, like the drinks, in front of the grave, and we think of our past, like our great grandparents and elders. Yeah,
amazing. I think you shared a picture on your Instagram channel actually. And
yes, I did.
Just in the really green field.
Mm-hmm.
And the image is just so vibrant that's sticking out in my memory.
Yes, because that's usually it's Korean Thanksgiving, Chuseok. So that happens when there's harvesting time, and yeah, so you get this beautiful scenery of very rich crops and yeah, vegetations and so on.
How did architecture come up for you amongst growing up in your hometown in a more of a agricultural rural setting?
Yeah, this is a long story. It's I've moved in quite a long time ago, because the family moved to Indonesia. So when I was 6, we moved to Indonesia. We lived through the period when they were just, I guess, receiving urbanizing the Jakarta. And then after that, I also lived in Hong Kong. Actually, because of a friend, we have a saying in Korean, 친구 따라 강남 간다, which means we go to Gangnam Style.
Yeah.
We go to Gangnam because of a friend. So it's meaning that you should meet a good friend, or you should have good friends around. And probably you have the similar saying. So I have this friend, Denise. And I'm gonna see her. She's in Singapore now, but she's an architect, and she really wanted to be. She wrote like an architect. She dressed like an architect, even in high school. So she said, there is a building that I have to visit. So I tagged along with her, and there was HSBC building by Foster.
Wow.
That was just built, finished. It felt like it's a building landed, from the moon.
Yeah.
But what was great is that the public ground is, it's piloted so that people could actually go across without actually entering the building. Anyway, so that's...
So this is a colonnade.
Yes, colonnade, yes. And then, so funny enough, we were just talking about that, how I became an architect by tagging along and seeing this amazing building. Yes, and then I entered the school in Seoul, Korean University. I had a good architecture course, and that's how it started.
Amazing. Amazing that you had this friend that was ready to go to become an architect, really.
Yes.
Bit of a cliche if you dress like an architect. Listeners, not all of us dress the same, but most of us do. And how did architecture come up for her? Was it a similar encounter? Do you know her origin story?
No.
Nah.
But maybe from a novel, but since then, because it was very different from, when you experience studying architecture and in seeing it from movies, or there was also Korean dramas that had architects in it. Always, male architects always having, great house and great lifestyle, which is not always the case. And so when I entered, we only had 10% women who were enrolled in the architectural course. It was I think 80 students total per year, and I think only few of us are now practicing architects amongst them. So it was not common to go to, because it was part of the engineering department. So it was still, we were called the engineers, and so that's how I started the school, and then at the education, and then right after graduation, because I was also introduced by a friend who had this brochure of the AA prospectus. At that time, was quite a radical school and founded by students. It's apparently 100 years ago, and I said, "Oh, I'm gonna maybe could go for 1 year as an experience," and that's how I went and ended up staying.
So for listeners, that's the Architecture Association in London. Yeah, very prestigious architecture school. So back then it was radical, was it?
Yes. Yeah. We didn't have to enroll to any courses or anything. We just have to show up if we are interested in urbanism. Elizabeth Libas, I still remember, she had courses on Thursday mornings, and if you're available, you would just turn up and be in her. We call it general studies. We had studios. We had studios, diploma studios and bachelor studios. It was vertical studios, and yes, radical. We worked in Belfast when there was bombing happening.
Wow.
We're trying to create peace through architecture. So that's some time ago. Yes, reminiscing.
That's wild to think about now, particularly through my education background. That was just so structured, so rigid.
Yeah.
You had to turn up. You had to do the work.
Yes.
There was this expectation that it was incredibly important. And did students then take that freedom seriously at the AA?
I think so. I think people came to the AA because of expectation of the initiative of their own initiative to learn, to be also, I guess, adventurous. And yes, so I think this was also one of the first years of having international students on board. And I think I was one of the first woman Korean architect to be there. I had amazing friends. I learned much more. I think also as much as learning from the actual learning from studios.
That's incredible. I have a story. How long did you stay in London after that?
So I stayed for 6 years. We then, after just finishing the school, 3 of us still, Turanj, Sandra, and myself, we called it Studio 3, and we entered this competition called Europan that was open to young architects at that time. It's quite well-known international open European competition, and we entered, and we used this leftover studio space. Said, oh, why don't we, because we were waiting to get the proper jobs, so, and we actually got selected, so they ended up building. I left to work in Germany, and I worked in Berlin afterwards and moved to Hong Kong. So this is like whole journey of being all over the place.
Incredible. Do you have a favorite city that you've lived in?
Oh, they're all very special. I think, but of course, Hong Kong has always been the second, I guess, city that I lived the longest. I was there in the 80s, and can I say like the period? 80s in Hong Kong, and then later on. So it's quite special. It's one of those dense city, but also it's quite full of nature around, and a lot to learn from that kind of architecturally and also urban context. And I actually taught full-time at the Chinese University of Hong Kong there for a period of time, and then I was back in Seoul in 2005, and that's when I started my own practice, because I had a son, and I couldn't really find time to be full-time working in an office. I was teaching and then having my own small practice running, small projects.
Amazing. So many architectural lessons. It's just travel is so important. And we'll come back to the traveling studio that you're running at Monash University later in this conversation. What was the core big idea around locale design for you?
There wasn't a big idea. It was when I founded it. Actually, the name came when I was in Hong Kong, and I thought it would be funny to be local design when I'm a foreign architect. Then I really became a local, and even now we're collaborating with we call it local architects firm who does the construction document and all that phasing, planning permits and so on. So it gets confusing when I'm called local design, so the local team. And so, yes, but I think I was more projecting. Even that time, it wasn't cool to call myself. Someone actually said, why don't you, change your name, because local design sounds really not very fancy. But I think then the names start popping up, local, even with Ks, and cafes popping up called local. And so I guess the even to see the context of in even architecture that was global at that time, like the star architects were operating globally. A lot of the star architects were coming to Korea to build museums and buildings. I had this inkling, I guess, to say, okay, we need to kind of know, also be appreciative of our own surrounding and heritage and locality. At the same time, being international. Yeah,
you've got to learn and really take pride in where you come from as a design culture as well. I love your journey. I love the story of how many countries you lived in, how many experiences you had, and hearing that, I really understand now how you're able to bring all these large multidisciplinary teams and collaborative teams and international teams together to do the work that you do, and perhaps also why you're such a great curator and you're interested in curation as a creative practice.
Thank you. Yeah.
Let's talk about the competition that was recently won by yourself and the team from Leon Architects and Studio Vulcan from Zurich. International collaboration, how incredible, from so many points around the world. The Banpo Hangang Connection Park and Cultural Facilities. What was that competition like, going into it, working on it remotely, locally?
Yes, this is a international competition that was announced through Project Seoul. So we have all the public projects all these major international competitions gets announced through this open website that has all these amazing projects. So when I first saw it, I thought, oh, this is something that we could do, because one of the first projects with local design, I was commissioned 25 infrastructure underpassage by the river, Han River, which is Hangang, is in Korean Han River, Hangang. So at that time, the budget was low, the time was short, all these difficulties.
The classic.
Yeah, classic. And then the person who was curating, I guess we call it MP, the master planner, said, the architect, the power the person has is refusing to do anything. And then once you're contracted, you're like the bottom of the the list. So I know that you want to not do it, but because you're young and you should really have the challenge to take on this on board, because it's a very important project to make this this public space welcoming to people who are using it. So I've taken on this task of doing this 25 underpassage, and what I did was to actually share these projects with other 4 architects, young architects who haven't like infrastructural river type of projects at that time. The architects did, buildings, not infrastructural things. We call it facilities. So that became a really a success story where we collaborated and then ended up building actually new structure completely from beginning. So you could actually influence designing structural elements in not just decorative. Then when I saw this competition, I thought, oh, this knowledge of knowing about the river flooding, all these infrastructural experiences that we had collaborating with engineers, thought, oh, this is a competition that we should actually be part of. Of course, when I was asking the own architect, Sojin Lee, she's also a woman architect, very important architect in Korea. She said, oh, that's crazy. It's an open call international competition. Anybody can enter, and you'll be amongst 100 firms competing, and you have to be first selected amongst 6 in order to get to the second phase. But at the end, we decided, okay, let's go for it. But what the kind of led us to do this is because the person who managed the briefing of the initial competition, he actually really worked on it for a whole year. So even the brief of the competition was quite good in that sense that first phase you don't have to put in so much effort. I mean, we did put in effort, but it was short in terms of the deadline. And then only one panel of digital, nothing printed, no prints or reports that needs to be handed. So we was luckily selected as one of the 6, and then we were amongst really well-known architects globally, and we presented, and it was all actually broadcasted live in YouTube.
Wow.
So people could actually even hear juries in discussion and in dispute until the final 2. So we knew that we were one of the final 2. And we were the only, I guess, the firms who were local. They were all international firms. And they already had the local architects from Korea that was to do the construction document phase, and expecting that there going to be a person who doesn't speak Korean selected, international firm, but we were selected. So when we were meeting at the end, when we were selected, and said, oh, isn't it nice that we speak Korean and we understand all these complications and everything that needs to be dealt with.
Yes.
When you're really working with the real side and real people with restrictions and all the planning regulations and so on. So yes.
That's amazing. And live broadcast to YouTube, as we are too. Hello, YouTube. But to have that transparency of the jury's decision, it's actually quite a remarkable competition and a brief to be written in this way.
Yes. Yoon Seung-yeon was the one who made the brief. Yeah.
I'm quite struck by how you never know where the seeds of those beginnings, those first projects, that's like, oh, it's just infrastructure. You never know where that's going to take you. Mm. And people should never refuse a design opportunity, because everything can be a design decision, and everything is a design decision, right?
I think that's what also, I think architecture department in Monash, we cherish that. It's like dealing with architecture, but also looking at a bigger term of what architecture is or urbanism is. And I was actually complaining in the beginning. I was like, I'm doing everything but architecture, because I was doing infrastructure. I was doing something with cardboard design, benches, So, but then all that was so fruitful and meaningful. Every piece of the detail that you put in, even to design the bench that needed to be this long, because we wanted also people to be able to rest comfortably and lie down. We have to argue with the city officials, because they didn't want possibly people sleeping too long on that bench. But at the end, when you give this respectful space to the public, they actually care for that space.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I think we can't underestimate the public.
Absolutely. That's one of my hills to die on. Absolutely. And there's nothing worse than when we design for the lowest common denominator. If you give people good design and a good building, good outcome, they will love it, they will cherish it, they will look after it. It's proven time and time again.
So that's why when I bring my students, we bring them to one of this passage that was cladded with ipe wooden structures, because the reason it's not for decoration is actually having electrical lines and lightings and all these things to accommodate that. So when we go and see, it's already like 12, it's already more than 10 years that's been there. Actually, in the beginning, the officials were worried that they might burn this wood down, or they might carve it, or things like that. But it's completely intact. Of course, they care. They maintain it. In I think several years, they would make paints over it. But so when I see that, so it's really a lesson. Even I myself didn't really was convinced that this is possible. That to provide this simple, very respected, good design, good space, with good lighting, and nice to be. Old people, they just sit in that tunnel because the wind goes through them, this tunnel, and they have a rest. And so this is great to be. That's why it's great to engage in this type of public facilities or spaces that you can always go and visit and see, be.
I love that.
Yeah.
I really love that story. How is stage 2 of the competition going? Where are we up? Is there any updates that you can share?
We're at the beginning phase of schematic design, and of course a lot of stakeholders, the cooperative, because this is a redevelopment project. We call it 재개발 in Korea. Very complicated to explain this. There is a song, 아파트, that's this whole apartment value and what it means to Koreans is very, very unique. I did also another reason I could become a curator for the Venice Biennale in 2021 was because I put in an application to be part of the exhibitor in 2006. So the subject was actually apartment, how to buy an apartment in Korea. So apartment was not just a place for living, it was part of how we see it as an investment, and it's a whole industry of branding and apartment being a source of status and so on. So that research, I guess, / exhibition of how to buy an apartment in Korea became also a source for me to understand the it's not like it cannot be simplified how things are perceived, and in even simple housing issues there's a lot of common things that we share. Like we want to keep these apartments, lovely apartments which was built in 60s, 70s, but also they are being demolished because we are densifying the city. But how can we maybe possibly keep some of these heritage, as C is as heritage. But of course, the site that we're working on, it's already, except one building, it's all demolished, the existing housing, and they're having high-rise buildings put in. But one thing nice about this is because it's our site is, the park is being donated, cultural facilities is being donated to the city. And the city intervenes when it comes to that donation, that the brief and the requirements are all thoroughly studied before it gets released to an open international competition and transparent in terms of judging.
Wow. That's awesome.
So we had 84 entries and we got selected. I'm just sharing also the good part, right?
Of course, all competitions aren't easy, but you had very strong insider knowledge of the site. You were very well placed to participate in it.
Yes, and you get paid to the second stage when you're entering.
Yeah. There you go. That's an ethical competition.
Yes.
So it's a much better setup. We do like to talk about architectural procurement on this program, and sometimes competitions can be a difficult procurement model to engage with, not always one that values good design, but this is a unique example of one that's been really successful. I'm interested in those parallels to Australia that you mentioned, and you even were involved with the Common Ground in Dialogue, a Australia-Korea Creative Practice in Dialogue Symposium.
Mhm.
Tell me a little bit about that one.
Well, this dialogue series, it actually sparked from being participants in the Seoul Biennale Architecture and Urbanism, curated by the title was Ground, and we entered as a Melbourne the title Melbourne Ground. There are a team of curators were involved there from Monash Urban Lab, and Louise Wright and Mel Dodd and everyone were part of this creation. And we said, if we're coming and doing an exhibition, we should actually engage with the architects in Korea. And I thought, why don't we pair some of these architects who are doing something that resonates, and then they can have a conversation to each other. So we had this first dialogue between these architects and about the common ground, and then that sparked, and it was sponsored by the Australian Embassy in Korea, and then that led to the second one, collaboration and collectiveness and so on. So we hope that we continue linking. So I'm actually acting as a conduit to link these places, because I'm here and I want also people from Korea to know amazing architecture, also culture here. And so I'm being this kind of ambassador between two places.
Architectural ambassador and conduit. It seems like this is what you've been doing your whole life.
I think this is something, that I enjoy. I want to be useful.
Certainly more than that. You're connecting. It seems like from the very beginning, you're connecting people, firms, designers, cities, connecting those ideas. Even with your work, your pedagogical work, you're teaching at Monash University in the architecture program. There's a future school. There's a international traveling studio coming up for the students this semester. Do you want to say a bit about that? How important is taking students away and giving them that experience to go on a traveling studio, go to a different context?
I wish, some of my students who've been to the we call the Seoul studio trip can share this, how amazing this whole journey was. It's our third year this year. So we're visiting, and there was some NCP funding that was that allows some students to be funded to travel. But I think when we are there, we're just not going around looking at architecture. We are actually engaging with artists. Park Sun-min is one who then curates a walk around Seoul city walls. That's 1,000-year-old city wall. And we have conversations with architects. We're visiting places. And we also have a site in Seoul where we then, when you really look into all these issues that students start to really see, this engage in a different ways. Like you really begin to see things that you haven't even seen what you have here. So you get this completely different perspective of different places. And yes, and I think this 2 weeks journey to Seoul, and we eat together, we walk together, we have engaged with students from architecture schools in Seoul. So that is such a privilege for me to be able to do this for the third year. It's a lot of preparation to set up this course, to have them move, and we think that we're just walking around, but it's curated. The walks are curated in a sense. Of course, it's not like by the minute, but we visit the river and the islands, and we have this, we call it Sewage Island, where a sewage distillation plant has been turned into a park. So we learn from those references. We bring it here, but also we're looking at references here in Australia. Yes. So, I can go on talking.
Do you have a favorite story or a student aha moment from the trip where you saw that light bulb go off, or something switched, something changed, and they were engaging with the place in a really different way that was transformative.
I think every day you could see the students transform. I think when you actually realize it the last day when I went out by Hae-Won Shin called Listen to the City, and it's called Decolonizing Seoul. That was a big title, but it was to walk around this area that was being demolished, but because it was a manufacturing area. And I think by that time, students knew, kind of clicked, they're like, oh, why are we here? Why are we looking? And, why are we all together doing all this? It's not just touring and visiting, but it's actually engaged in a bigger discussion of some things that is of what is uniquely the next kind of phase of how we should be looking at architecture, maybe. It's really about questioning and can we sustain the way we, build as architects. Many layers of things that we get to question and also discuss openly.
And have a group, have a team, have an academic environment that supports that. Absolutely amazing.
And then we get to enjoy the food and all the things.
What's your
that is in
favorite
this,
food? What's your favorite Korean dish that all listeners should try?
Oh, the students love bibimbap, and that's the ingredients. It gets tasty when you mix them. So all separately, they're all vegetables and things, but then when you mix it together, that's what we like. Very Korean way that we like to. There's mix of different dishes. So I recommend trying. I'm sure everybody knows.
It's been a little while since I've had bibimbap. I want to pick up on curation because you've also run and curated an art gallery, local gallery.
Oh,
tell us a bit about that project.
Not worth mentioning.
Why not?
How did you know?
I know about the gallery because you told me about it once, but it's also on your socials.
Oh, yes.
I'm interested in that curation piece because I see that as an architectural act. I see architecture as an act of curation and bringing together disparate teams, disparate elements, very, very diverse and different, organizing it, ordering it, structuring it, even just like this trip that may start feeling, oh, why are we going here? Why are we going there? Why is this different? And then eventually it comes together.
Yeah.
And the audience is able to understand and the public is able to understand. And as we said, it's always important to never insult the intelligence of the public. Yes. And when that curation is done well, they do understand, and everybody realizes that you don't need an architectural educational training to know what is good design and what is good curation. So,
yes, it's also all seems accidental, right? These things, it's not really planned ahead. But I think I have the tendency to learn by doing things, also failing and redoing things in another way. And local gallery, so I have a gallery. And then people are like, what? You have a gallery? So it's a pop-up gallery. It's a gallery run once a year. And it started because there was an empty, beautiful architecture building that was not being leased out, or not being rented for a whole year. So I was like, what? You know, this building is not rented out. And then I had these artists who wanted to exhibit during this period called festival. And I wanted also that to be coming to the local neighborhoods. And these really talented artists had not had the space. So I thought, how can maybe that the few small galleries can collaborate and use the space. And I convinced the owner to rent it for free. And then, but it didn't end up that they had the resource to just start within like 3 weeks. So I said, oh, well, how hard can it be to set up a gallery? It's like
that's such an architect's response. It's like, how hard can it be? Let's just do it.
Because like sometimes we build their interior fit outs in 2 weeks, sometimes. So I said, okay, why don't we set up? And I commissioned the curator, a friend who's art creator, to help out. And then so it was set up. So it was just beautiful urban setting with this artist, and it worked out really well. But then realized that actually there's all these other things that related to galleries and running a gallery. But that then became a second gallery that opening happened another neighborhood in Sochon. So now people are seeing what I do, and there's one friend who had the space and said, "Oh, I've copied your pop-up way, so it was empty for so instead of leaving it empty, like using it as a space for art." So that's how it started. So we'll see how it goes. I think I need one exhibition per year, so I need to prepare one this year. Last year was, this artist, very important artist, who really documented the daughter who wanted to exhibit, and so all these things are, I guess, architectural in that sense, because architects have this, at least some context to the people who own buildings. So we can actually use that connections to say, listen, can I use it in the space for 2 weeks? But of course, the owner has to agree. But the important thing is, after that exhibition, the place was rented out.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's marketing. That's
marketing. Yeah.
That's
it's like fitting out. It's it's like giving that imagination to the space, and of course the artwork does curate to the space and give people imagination.
That's the power of design right there. That's a perfect example. And just what can be done, what can be achieved. This is a common theme, I think, in your work, where your scales are shifting between small projects and big projects, and how those ideas have sustained each other and zoomed in and out. And you're shifting countries too, and it's dynamic, but it's connected.
Yes, and it's not out of this big intention. It's more, of course, you've got these small life things that you need to sort out on the way as you are. So this intention is not architecture driven, but I think there is an attitude where I'm interested in engaging and collaborating. I think I'm bored of just doing my own things, because it's so predictable. So I like to collaborate. It gets interesting. Of course, there's hiccups on the way, in the way when you're collaborating and not knowing and starting something also, financially and so on. There are lessons to be learned, but I'm still exploring, and then out of this competition, it's giving me, kind of encouraging me to also venture out to other interesting, not pure just building, but other research related areas.
Fantastic. If it's not a big intention, if it's not a big scheme, a big idea that guides you, and yes, life happens to all of us, doesn't it? And there's circumstances that move and change us. Is there anything else that propels you along, that is your guiding kind of direction, or your North Star of sorts?
I didn't realize this until, I think, the time when I spent time here in Melbourne in Australia, and doing this travel vertically, because I was traveling more horizontally.
Yeah, east-west in
East,
the
west,
northern hemisphere. Yes.
So what is great is that there is only 2 hours difference now, time-wise, to Seoul and Melbourne. We're in the similar, that line. And then sometimes when it's not summertime, it's only 1 hour difference. And then when I'm traveling and I'm looking at this vertical map and going across all these countries in Asia, and I thought, this is where we have to learn from each other, also have connections more vertically, because there's things that we share, like geologically, and also the way that history of, that we also colonized country, and then sad history, partial, but at the same time there is all this wisdom and resilience, and especially coming from kind of me as I guess even in Korea, I was told when I was young, oh, you're, because you're second, not a son, like everybody cry because you're not a son.
Oh.
That culture. It doesn't mean anything bad. It's more like that's how it was, right? So coming from that background and being able to become this, architect who could win competitions and could teach and voice, because I thought that architecture, I didn't have to speak much, but actually it's liberating in a way to just voice now.
Yeah.
And also being kind of at this age where I'm like, okay, maybe I could start speaking my mind.
Good.
So
It took a little bit of convincing to get you on this evening, but I'm so glad that you've joined us and you're sharing your voice and your story. It's one of the most remarkable journeys, and I think so inspirational for students. And maybe even your students don't know some of these stories about you that I think really can inspire a lot of young and emerging practitioners. Who have been some of your mentors?
Oh, too many to mention. But I think the mentors are successful, but actually they're people who are sharing your everyday concerns in life. Could be also your friend. It could be someone you have not really known very long time, but comes into that moment where giving a different perspective to things. So, and even people who give you really hard time, like out of collaboration or doing something together and end up really having a hard time. I see it as like that was a real mentoring in a different sense. So like every project that one does, that we just like, oh, I don't know if I can finish this. So
Every day is a school day.
now I'm now talking like a teacher, but that's what
we all learn from each other, and we all learn on the journey. I wonder, where's the journey going next for you? Do you have any both predictions for what you think some of these collaborations might be interested in, where we're sort of moving as a design movement or research movement? What are your feelings as to the future of architectural investigation? Not necessarily on the far horizon, but what comes up for you when you think about?
Yeah, I think the way that the architecture education, when I was curating the future school, it was under the theme of climate crisis, diaspora, migration and innovation, and this ecosystem, and how to do that precisely. It's needs to be kind of you have to be looking at, for instance, small details of how to drain, because we're working with the landscape designer, and how to make that water drain and then last in the soil longer so that the vegetation can grow, because we were actually planning this infrastructure that is a floating garden above the highway, the major highway cutting across the Seoul city. So thinking about soil, thinking about light and shade and so on. So I think this connecting kind of to a wider field, not just in the silo of architecture in a classic sense, but to really broaden that boundary. But at the same time, I mean, we love that, very core architecture, which is drawing and building and so on. Yeah, but also this discussion of cities, architects amongst this region in Asia, also sharing similar development stories. So we don't want to repeat all the bad things that we've already done to I guess, like for instance, the river. Sometimes the Han River actually had the period where they completely concretized the edges, and then they had the time they were demolishing all the edges and making it green, and making it more sustainable, and then now they want to get rid of the highway. They want Asian cities, right? 'Cause how can we just share these knowledge, like over time amongst ourselves, not looking at particularly just in a textbook case, but actually learning from what has happened so far since the 60s and after the war, and especially in Korea. So all these things, I think, is something that I'm interested in. I don't know where it's going to pan into, but I'll keep bringing students over if I'm here to Korea, and also I'm stopping by like in between cities like Singapore, Hong Kong. I'm connecting with architects broadly. I'm also connecting curators of the national pavilions in Venice. So this is called Curators Collective, where the first time over 50 national pavilion curators in Venice Biennale were connected through my initiative, saying, well, why don't we gather all together and work in collaboration, not competition.
Amazing.
And this is during the COVID, because when everybody was locked down. And so this is something that I think somehow inherent in me, to just being able to just like reach out and say, oh, why don't we meet up?
Just pull all these people together.
Yeah. Of course, it's a lot of side work, but then it's enjoyable.
It's so rewarding.
Mm.
You know what comes to mind for me in this moment? That Charles and Ray Eames filmed The Power of 10.
Oh, I don't know.
And they zoom. And they zoom through these scales. And then eventually when you start seeing the world, you get the overview effect, that moment when the astronauts come to appreciate we all live on one planet. And we're all connected, we're all human. And this is our only home, this one planet.
And also this ocean of being hospitable. Because every time when you go somewhere, like we had a lesson yesterday, ethics in architecture, and Kathy Weghorn and facilitated this discussion with Brad, and there was this discussion about you're always a visitor to even a notion of going somewhere. You can always become a visitor, and this notion of being hospitable, because you can always be the other side of being a traveler.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's so true.
So this is the thing we're good at, I think, at least in Korea, being hospitable through food and drinks and music. And so that's why I think the key reason why students want to go there is this. Not really, architecture, but just walking around and having good food and enjoying the urban life and people. And the hospitality.
I want to play a tiny bit of a little track at the end before we finish up, but before I do,
yes, can you?
I want to ask my last question, and that's, what gives you hope?
I think the trust, and still being not optimistic, but I think the trust that there's something good about some of these very essential things that we experience through architecture, art, and this human connection, and so that kind of gives me hope that there is always a better side to things. Yeah, but that's a difficult question. Yeah.
There's always possibility. There's always potential.
Potential.
I'll ask an easy question then to finish up. Tell us about the hugely popular song APT. 'Cause you mentioned it earlier in the conversation
I
about
don't know if I'm
apartments.
in the position to explain it, but APT is short for apartment, so we call it 아파트. Yeah.
Yeah.
So 아파트. So
Thank you so
Yes.
much for joining me on the program
thank
tonight.
you so
Hae-Won.
much. Thank you for inviting me.
It's been a delightful conversation. Thanks for joining me for another evening of radio architecture with Ilana Razbash. This live show was broadcast and recorded in the Radio Karim studio on Bunurong Country. You can replay the show wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for tuning in and supporting community radio. Take care.
Hey, this is Chris Mitzi, and you're listening to Radio Karam. Thanks for tuning in.